Indian students go overseas just with one dream of building a life abroad. Be it the United States, be it Canada, be it United Kingdom. Every nation, you name it, Indians are there. They are building a life there, they are working really hard, earning a good sum of money and sending back home. But with every single journey comes difficulties, and that's where we enter the picture. Here on Skyline tonight, ladies and gentlemen, it's me, Driti, Atri, and we are going to decode the policies, the situation, the circumstances that Indians have to face that will affect their life abroad. So let's start with the first segment tonight. For decades, America offered opportunity and Indians bought talent, ambition, enterprise. It became one of the great immigrant success stories of our times. Much has changed. Indians today, they head the global corporation, they occupy senior position in tech, in finance, teach at America's finest universities, they run hospitals, they run laboratories, they build the startup, and they are increasingly visible in politics and public life. More than 5.2 million people of Indian origin, they live in the US today. And Indian families are among the most highly educated immigrant communities in that particular nation. And yet, traveling through America in 2026, I find myself asking a simple question. America clearly still wants Indian talent, but does it remain equally comfortable with the Indians who bring that talent? Well, I don't ask this as an accusation. America has given generations of Indians opportunities their own country was often unable to provide. But the mood around immigration, it has changed. And the journey from skilled immigrant to permanent resident, it has become painfully uncertain. Now consider the scale of India's contribution here. In fiscal year 2024, Indians accounted for about 71% of approved H-1B petition. Roughly 7 out of every 10 approval, it went to Indians. And the pipeline, it begins at universities. Around 363,000 plus Indian students were studying in the US during the 2024-25 academic year, making Indian Americans largest source of international students. For decades, India complained about brain drain. But perhaps we framed the problem incorrectly here. Ladies and gentlemen, the brains, they were Indians, but the ecosystem that recognized, financed, and multiplied their value, it was often American. If India wants its best scientists, engineers, and entrepreneurs to stay, or wants successful Indians abroad to return, patriotic appeal, it will not be enough for us. Universities, companies, investors, research institutions, they have to create an ecosystem where talent can actually flourish. America has its own contradiction, by the way. Its economy has become remarkably good at recruiting Indian talent, while its immigration system struggles to provide that talent with a predictable route towards permanency here. The green card backlog for Indians, it has become almost surreal. The August 2025 visa bulletin that shows EB2 India unavailable for final action, while EB3 final action date, it stands at January 1st, 2014. Behind that date, there are real people who have spent maybe years working, paying taxes, raising their children, and building career in America. There is something contradictory about an economy saying that we value your skills, definitely, and that too a lot, while its immigration system that says a different thing. We cannot tell you when you will finally belong here with us. And that brings us to our next story tonight, because America's decision, it do not stay inside America. What happens in Washington, it can travel all the way to your kitchen in India. I'll start this news with a real life example. Neha starts most of her mornings by checking her mutual fund app. She's 34, she works at mid-sized firm in Gurugram and has been putting 15,000 rupees into SIPs every single month. Now for the third month in a row, her screen is red. It is not a crash. but it is enough to make her wonder whether she has made a bad call or not. Well, she has not. Part of the answer sits thousands of kilometers away in Washington, D.C., where the US government debt, well, that has crossed $40 trillion, and that's a lot. That number may sound distant, but it has a way of traveling here in India. It can affect anyone's SIP return, the price of cooking oil in India, or the order book of an exporter whose American client have started spending less. Now, when investors they become nervous about America's finances, they often become cautious across global markets too. Indian equities can see foreign money leave. Once money leaves India, the rupee comes under a lot of pressure. A weaker rupee makes dollar priced export more expensive for them. Particularly here we are talking about crude oil and fertilizers. Well, by August 19, total US federal debt stood at around $40.047 trillion, roughly $3.09 trillion higher than the earlier year. The Congressional Budget Office projects debt held by the public could rise from 101% of GDP in 2026 to 120% by 2036. Net interest payment could rise from about $1 trillion to $2.1 trillion over the same period of time. But let's kill one common myth right now. This is not America going bankrupt, not at all. The real risk is a crisis of confidence. If investors begin losing faith in the US government debt, borrowing cost could rise, market could shake, and the dollar's dominance that could gradually face pressure further. In the first 5 months of 2026, foreign institutional investors sold nearly 2.3 lakh crore rupee worth of Indian equities. Domestic investors, specifically through SIPs, helped absorb much of that particular selling. And then there is the rupee. In August 2026, it was trading near 95.7 rupee to a dollar, nearly 10% weaker than the year earlier. India imports most of the crude oil that it consumes. So a weaker rupee combined with expensive oil, it can quickly become an inflation problem for us. And then there is another connection here. More than half of India's software services export, it go to the United States. Well, if American companies become cautious, technology budgets that can be delayed, projects can slow, and hiring can suffer in Bengaluru and even in Gurugram. So, America's debt may be recorded in Washington, but it affects, everyone maybe. They can reach Indian households, businesses, farms, portfolios. And yes, while we are talking about money here is another number that may surprise you. India has more banknotes in circulation than the US and Euro area all combined. India has much higher number of banknotes in circulation than the US dollar or euro. It's a big deal, right? Yeah, but that's right. According to the recent remarks by RBI Deputy Governor Shirish Chandra Murmu, about 176 billion Indian banknotes are currently in circulation. Compare that, roughly about 56 billion US dollar bill and around 30 billion euro banknotes. But why India does need so many notes here? Let's talk about that. Ladies and gentlemen, the answer that is largely the denomination structure. India continues to use a large number of lower value note, particularly 10 or 20 rupee note. Add to that India's huge population, the scale of small value transaction, and continued importance of cash, and you get a huge number of physical banknotes here. But yes, there is an important point here. The number of notes does not mean that Indians necessarily use more cash than Americans or Europeans in every single situation. It partly reflects how the currencies are actually structured. Well, Murmu said India produces around 28 to 30 billion banknotes every year across 6 denominations and disposes of roughly 21 billion pieces, and that too annually. Can you think about what that really means operationally? Every note has to be printed. It has to be transported. It has to be counted, stored, circulated, checked for quality, and eventually destroyed when it becomes unfit to use. The scale of this entire currency management system, it is enormous. And yes, Despite India's rapid growth in digital payment, cash has not disappeared. UPI may have transformed the way Indians pay for everything. You name it, groceries, taxis. But you know what? Physical currency remains deeply embedded in the economy. Well, the huge number of banknotes therefore tell us something very important about India here. It is not simply a story about cash versus digital payment. It is also a story about population, denomination, geography, and sheer scale of everyday transaction. Well, from the world of currency, we now move to a very different kind of story, one that directly concerns Indians who are living in America. An alleged IC arrest involving a Gujarati cab driver in Chicago that is raising question, and that too among the entire community. A Gujarati man working as a ride-hailing driver in Chicago has reportedly been detained by the ICE. Sources say the man was caught near an intersection in Independence, Oak Forest, about 9:30 in the morning on Wednesday. According to the information that is circulating within the Gujarati community, well, he had reached a residential building just to pick up a passenger. After that, right when he was doing that, the IC agents allegedly surrounded him and handcuffed him. In fact, there is also talk that his name may be Nagin Bhai, but there has been no official confirmation of his identity. In the meantime, messages about the incident have been circulating in WhatsApp groups of Gujaratis living in Chicago. Some community members even confirmed that an arrest took place, but they did not have the further details about the man's immigration status, how long he has been living in America, and what exactly led to his arrest. Well, immigration experts say that ICE arrests can occur when a person already has an immigration case, a pending removal order, or no legal status. Similar cases involving Gujaratis have happened in Chicago before, with some people spending months in immigration detention. And Chicago is not the only place here. Gujaratis living in America say that arrests have also taken place in states including Kentucky, including Georgia, Florida, North Carolina, and New York. In fact, in some situations, an ordinary encounter with local police, it can eventually bring immigration authorities into the big picture. People with pending asylum cases, they can also face deportation depending on their individual circumstances further. Well, here some choose to fight their cases from detention. Others, they eventually sign removal paper and they are forced to return to India. And also, there is growing anxiety among people who overstayed their visa. And there should be. Ladies and gentlemen, some have become extremely cautious about domestic air travel because, let's be honest here, airport security and immigration records, they can intersect, specifically under the Trump rule. The larger message, it's very clear. Listen carefully. Immigration enforcement has become a source of serious uncertainty, and that too for many Indian families who are living in America without any permanent status. And this is not the only case that is putting Gujarati families on the edge, by the way. Another Gujarati woman who had spent 12 years in America was recently deported along with her son. Well, a Gujarati woman who had been living in America for about 12 years has reportedly been deported to India along with her young son. According to the information received, the woman had entered the US with her husband and later gave birth to a son over there. The family was reportedly living in Republican state and running a store. Her husband reportedly had a work permit, although there are no clear details about the woman's own immigration case in the meantime. The woman was reportedly shopping at Walmart with her son when an ICE agent picked her up from the parking lot. Just 7 days after her arrest, she was sent back to India. You know what makes the whole story particularly complicated is that her son is reportedly a US citizen and around 8 years old. When the mother was deported, the child also returned to India with her. The two are now reportedly living in North Gujarat. But this particular case, it highlights a common misunderstanding about American immigration law. Having a child born in America, that does not automatically protect an undocumented parent from deportation. A child who is a US citizen can potentially sponsor a parent after turning 21. But a minor child, he cannot simply prevent immigration authorities from removing a parent. In fact, there are also families who are trying to use special immigrant juvenile status for children, hoping that their child's immigration status will eventually help the entire family. But even that does not automatically solve a parent's immigration problem, and that's a big misconception, ladies and gentlemen. Well, for thousands of Gujarati families, this creates a painful situation. The child may be American, while the parent remain without legal status. And when immigration enforcement becomes stricter, families are suddenly finding themselves making decisions that they never ever expected. Whether children stay in America, whether parents return to India, and whether families are separated across two nations. Well, the message is becoming increasingly clear. Having a US born son does not guarantee that undocumented parent can remain in the US. And yes, while immigration enforcement is one side of the Indian American story, there is another side that is much darker. A 10th pass Gujarati, well, that person has now been sentenced in a multi-dollar fraud case, and that too in the United States. Shreyas Chaudhary, a 10th pass Gujarati man from Gandhinagar, that is in Gujarat, India, has been sentenced to 9 years in prison in a multi-million-dollar parcel fraud case in America. Well, Shreyas, he was arrested in September 2024. Well, along with him, Shreyas was arrested in September 2024. Two other people, Trisha Chaudhary and Yash Rawal, they were also arrested in the same case. In the meantime, Shreyas pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit money laundering in May 2026. Ladies and gentlemen, according to the evidence that was presented in the court, he was involved in collecting millions of dollars in cash and gold from elderly American victims of fraud. The court then ordered him to serve his prison sentence and pay about $5.1 million in restitution. After completing his sentence, he also will face probation. There is also strong possibility that he could eventually be deported to India because he does not have any permanent immigration status till now. In fact, his lawyer has asked the court for mercy. Pointing to his background, Shreyas came from a poor family in small Gujarat village. He had studied only till 10th standard and he did not speak English well. But the court focused on the seriousness of the crime here and the harm that caused to the victims. In the case, Yash Rawal, he was reportedly the first to be caught by FBI while collecting a parcel from a victim. Investigators then uncovered Shreyas' alleged role in directing the couriers and managing the goods that were collected from the victims. Well, the case is part of a larger parcel scam that involved several Gujaratis in the US. In fact, before 2025, the business had become widespread enough that people operating from India, they were reportedly sending men to America on visitor visa to collect the parcel. Some Gujarati students and young people, they also became involved here. Now, for some, what looked like easy money ended with prison sentence, arrest, and the possibility of deportation. The painful lesson, it's very simple. A business that appears profitable for a few months, it can destroy an entire life when the law catches up. From crime and immigration, we now turn to something much closer to home. The Indian potbelly was once seen as a sign of prosperity. Today, doctors are warning that it can be a serious health concern. Let's talk about the Indian potbelly first. It was once seen as a badge of prosperity and aging respectfully. In films, it became the stereotypes of lazy officials, maybe pokey uncles or a corrupt policeman. In some communities, a bigger belly, it could even suggest that a man was eating well. But today, doctors are looking at a very different perspective here. India's obesity crisis, it is growing rapidly. India had around 180 million overweight or obese adult in 2021. And a new study warns that this number could rise dramatically by 2050. Here, one major concern is abdominal obesity or excess fat around the belly. Well, according to the latest National Family Health Survey, about 40% of women and 12% of men in India, they have this kind of obesity. Under Indian guidelines, abdominal obesity, that means a waist circumference about 90 centimeters for men and 80 centimeters for women here. In the meantime, if we talk about the United States here, most of the men, they are fit. Most of the men who are above 50 years of age, they do their own work. They don't have housemaid who can cook for them. They don't have people who can clean for them. They want to clean on their own. They go to the gym, they exercise, they go to the parks for a morning walk. People in the United States, they are more active than the Indians who just sit at home, watch television after their retirement. But you know what? It's not about India versus the US health crisis. It is not about how Indian uncle. It's not about how India's 50 plus elderly people, they are lazy. It's not about how American uncles, they are healthy. It is about why does belly fat really matter here? It does because it is not simply about appearance. Abdominal fat is associated with metabolic problem including insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes and heart diseases as well. And that's why in India, heart attack is too common. South Asians, including Indians, they also tend to develop metabolic problem at lower level of body fat as compared with some other populations, specifically the Americans. So this means that simply looking at weight or BMI, it may not tell you the full story here. Lifestyle changes are playing a major role now. More processed food, takeaway, instant meal. In fact, that lazy routine and changing eating habits, they all are contributing to the problem. Indian doctors are therefore increasingly looking beyond the BMI now, and they are paying attention to where fat is stored, metabolic health and physical function as well. And yes, there is another important lesson that we all need to learn. But yes, America is also not perfect. India is dealing with problem that America had faced for decades now. The two nations have very different population and lifestyles, though there is awareness in America now. So ladies and gentlemen, the old American experience is therefore a warning for India today. Once unhealthy habits become too normal, reversing them back, that becomes much harder. And now from one of the most personal Indian-American connection, we move to something much bigger and much more spectacular. A massive Lord Murugan statue is coming up in the United States. And that's a big deal for all the South Indians. And why just South Indians? All the Indians living all around the globe. The Indian cultural footprint in America is becoming impossible to miss. After the enormous Hindu temple in New Jersey attracted global attention, another ambitious project is now taking shape in North Carolina. A massive Lord Murugan statue and temple campus. The statue is planned in Moncure in Chatham County, North Carolina. The proposed Murugan statue itself, it will be about 155 feet tall, standing on a pedestal of approximately 35 feet, and that would give the structure a total height of about 190 feet from the ground to the top. Let me tell you, that is taller than the Statue of Liberty. In the meantime, the project is being planned on around 130 acres of land, which will eventually become a large temple and cultural campus. It's a proud moment for South Indians, by the way. North Carolina, the state has become an important destination for the growing South Indian community. And yes, particularly here we are talking about people from Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka. And yes, this is a place where Lord Murugan is deeply reserved. The temple will not simply be a place of worship, by the way. The wider campus is being planned as a cultural and community space where future generations can remain connected to the Indian traditions. Well, the project is being developed in phases here. The first phase includes site preparation, the main temple, 3 gopurams and roads around the campus. It is approximated to cost about $3 to $5 million. The complete project is expected to cost more than $10 million, with funding coming largely from the donations here. In the meantime, Indian immigrant organizations, South Indian community, devotees and fundraising initiative have all contributing to this prestige project further. And that is perhaps the most interesting part of the entire story. Indian communities are not simply taking Indian traditions with them to America today. They are building permanent institutions over there. You name it, temples, cultural centers, and community spaces that may remain for generations and maybe decades now. And you know what? This is more than a statue. It is a symbol that Indian American identity is becoming a permanent part of America's cultural landscape. But sometimes, let's be honest here, culture travels in a very different direction. An Indian woman has now called out the US fashion brand over a dress that she says it looks remarkably like a traditional Indian sari. An Indian entrepreneur has accused an American fashion brand of repacking a traditional Indian sari as a Western style dress, basically triggering a debate about cultural appropriation. Arshia Moorjani, founder of beauty brand Mary Story, called on the US-based fashion label JWPEI over its botanical, embellished, draped overlay, the maxi dress. In fact, her argument was simple here. The design looks remarkably similar to a traditional Indian sari. Well, Moorjani questioned why a garment with such a strong resemblance to a sari was being marked as a new Western silhouette rather than acknowledging its Indian roots. And yes, this is where the whole conversation that becomes bigger than just one dress or just one sari. For millions of Indians, the sari is not simply another fashion trend. It's a garment with centuries of history, regional variations, and cultural meaning. You know, the debate over cultural appropriation, it is not really new in the United States. You know, the debate over cultural appropriation, it's not really new. But social media has completely changed the scale of the conversation. Earlier, a fashion brand could borrow an element from another culture and perhaps face very little public scrutiny. Today, an Indian creator can spot the design, make a video, and reach millions of people within hours just to educate them that, hey, this is not a maxi, this is Indian sari. Now, suddenly, a product launch can become a debate about credit, ownership, inspiration, and cultural recognition. There is also a larger question here, by the way. When does inspiration become limitation? Well, fashion has always borrowed across cultures. Designers do take idea from different countries, tradition, historical period. But the debate begins when something deeply rooted in one culture is presented as an entirely new invention somewhere else. Now, ladies and gentlemen, whether one agrees with Moorjani's criticism or not, the whole incident shows how quickly cultural conversation can now cross the borders. But yes, our next story takes us from fashion to travel. And once again, the lesson, very, very simple here. When you travel abroad, knowing the local rules, that matters the most. An Indian travel blogger has explained why a fellow Indian guest was removed from a hostel in London after she allegedly failed to leave her room at the required checkout time. The vlogger, his name is Rahul, he is known as Nomad Mickey on Instagram. He said that the whole incident was not about racism, but about the guest allegedly failing to follow the hostel rules. According to him, the hostel had a 10 a.m. checkout time, something that is very common at many hostels in London. Staff reportedly asked the woman several times to leave because another guest needed that particular room. But the situation, it allegedly escalated. The woman began recording the incident and, well, footage of her being removed from the property, it started circulating online. Well, Rahul then shared his side of the story, warning people not to judge the entire situation from a short viral video. He pointed out a simple thing. If you only see the moment when somebody is being removed, you may not see what really happened behind the camera. He said hostel staff had reportedly asked the woman very politely several times to check out, but she kept delaying her departure. Well, here Rahul also addressed that the incident had nothing to do with the woman being Indian. Well, that's a very sad thing when we are hearing that. His broader message was that travelers need to understand the rules of country and property that they are visiting. A hotel or a hostel, it can have specific checkout timings, cancellation policies, and other conditions. And guests, they are just expected to follow them because they are checking out in their property. Well, the whole incident, it also highlights something very important about social media these days, ladies and gentlemen. A 30-second clip that can create a complete narrative before anybody knows the full story. Once a video goes viral, people immediately begin talking about racism, they talk about discrimination, they talk about mistreatment. Let's be honest here, sometimes that may genuinely be the case. But sometimes, as Rahul argued here, context, it changes everything. And finally, we come to the story that takes us to Canada, where two pro-Khalistani separatists, they have reportedly received a warning from Canadian police about potential threats to their lives. Two pro-Khalistan separatists in Canada have reportedly received letters from law enforcement warning them about a potential threat to their life. The recipients reportedly include Inderjeet Singh Khosla, SFJ's Canadian Corridor for the so-called Khalistan referendum, and Manjinder Singh from British Columbia. Sikhs for Justice have blamed India for the threat, by the way, but the reported police warnings point towards a possible criminal angle here. So India is not involved. The RCMP has not publicly provided details about the exact nature of the threat though, or where it came from. Here, Khosla linked the warning to the next phase of the so-called referendum scheduled in Edmonton on October 8th. Khosla, he became SFG's Canadian Corridor after Hardeep Singh Nijjar. He was killed in Surrey, British Columbia in June 2023. Nijjar's killing triggered one of the biggest diplomatic crises in India-Canada relation after then Prime Minister Mr. Justin. He alleged a potential link between Indian agents and the killing. India rejected those claims though. We rejected then, we rejected now. Well, relationship has since improved under Trudeau's successor, Mark Carney. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Carney, they have met multiple times now, while India and Canada are also negotiating a comprehensive economic partnership agreement further. Canadian law enforcement has separately said that there is no evidence that is suggesting that Indian officials were involved in the organized crime investigation that is connected to the latest charges here. RCMP Deputy Commissioner Lisa said that there was no evidence through that investigation and the charges that Indian officials were charged or sought in any way. She later said that nothing has come out today to link the Indian government. Ladies and gentlemen, that distinction, it matters a lot. Why? Because this entire issue, it sits at the intersection of organized crime, separatist policy, national security, and India-Canada relationship. And yes, that brings us to the end of today's Skyline. From Indian talent in America to America's debt that is hitting Indian wallet, from 176 billion banknotes to immigration arrest, from Gujarati families facing uncertainty to the growing Indian culture footprint abroad. These stories may look completely different on the surface, ladies and gentlemen, but let's be honest here. There is just one common thread that is running through all of them. India and the Indian community are no longer watching the world from the sideline. We are deeply connected to it. Well, I'm Driti Atri. This was Skyline, and I'll see you in the next episode.